Okay. All right. So, magandang araw sa inyong lahat. Again, welcome to another session on language and culture. Um, Siguro alam nyo naman na, I hope you have access to the article um, right now. If not, at least you have read it and have taken down notes because much of our discussion really revolves around that article. All right. Some of you probably are a bit are wondering, no, kung bakit why that particular article because of all sorts of reasons. Of course, we're talking about language and culture in general, right? And number two, because I would like us to get us a feel of the issues outside the Philippines, right? For example, in the context of Africa, in the context of the different countries and cultures of Africa, and hopefully find parallelisms, with us, in terms of what sort of issues we have as far as language and culture are concerned. And of course, the fact that it is in the context of hip hop, um, I think it very much relates also to my own um, understanding or my own belief, that studying issues as deep and as serious as, for example, the politics of language, culture, and so on and so forth, can actually be made through everyday things, everyday culture, yung hip hop, um yung let's say mga P-pop, for example, music, halimbawa, um even linguistic landscapes, the text around us, the everyday things, everyday practices, the things that we listen to, hindi kailangang mahirap at or inaccessible yung mga pedagogical texts natin to be able to actually talk about um, language issues in general, specifically, and language and gender and culture in broader sense as far as this class is concerned. So yung context na yun ng article, which is actually hip hop and how hip hop actually, generates a lot of like insights into the nature of language and the nature of language use more specifically. I think it's something that should be very, very telling for all of us. Hindi lang kasi natin pag-aaralan yung mga theoretical insights, but also the practical ways to actually get us or ourselves to understand, these issues as well. All right. So just to give you a background again, just to remind you that the past two sessions, meaning that last session and this session, are devoted to basically unpacking everything that we know and do not know about the nature of language. All right. Later on, before I end, of course, I'll try to consolidate the things that we have done and we have talked about. All right. And then we move on to the concept of culture, which is next, in the next two sessions as well. So ngayon, basically, we might be talking about so many different things, all right? But it's all going back to the very nature of language. Ano ba ang language? What is this construct that we call language? Because parang ang dali-dali lang sabihin, no, language, this is language. But I think since last week, for example, and even prior to that, when you were writing your own assignment, um, the very notion of language is itself very contested. All right. So hindi siya given kaagad na when we use the term language, when anyone uses the term language, it already is clear. All right. It's not. All right. And so when you actually go and then study language, when you go and study approach a particular set of data to talk about language, um, you have to be very clear. Ano ba ang ibig mong sabihin ng language? Ano bang perception mo sa tinatawag na tong language? Because as you most likely have already understood based on the article now, right? Um, Language is a construct. Language is an ideology. All right. There are certain things that operate in our mind, right, as to what language is, but it's not a given. All right. So yun yung gusto kong yung ma-imbibe natin, I mean, there are so many terms, there are so many concepts, but the very idea that the very nature of language itself, our understanding of language itself is contested. All right? Hindi siya given. Yun pa lang yung example na lang ng language and dialect eh. For example, um, medyo ma-problema na kaagad, di ba? There's so many people that talk about language in certain ways and so on and so forth. And this time around, translanguaging naman. So ibabalik ko yon yung konsepto ng language and dialect later, to be able to consolidate. But let's focus on the um, the article itself. All right? So ilan ba tayo ngayon? One, two.
9 po, sir. Ay,
Nine sila, no?
8 po.
Nine.
8 po.
Okay, sige. So no, kasi what I'd like to do is to magkaroon muna ng breakout rooms. I'll do the breakout rooms na lang din because I can do it now, Dr. Isa. So I'll put you in groups of 2 or 3, all right, very, very quickly, all right, just to get us, get you to, surface all the things that you have read. You know about the article that I assigned for you to read, right? So there are a few things that I would like you to basically just look into. Number one, all right, within your group, talk about a key point in the article, all right, that struck you the most, all right. And when I say struck you the most, it struck you the most in terms of, ito pala ang ibig sabihin ng language or language use or language linguistic mobility. So yun yung una. And pangalawa, all right, draw parallelisms or connections between these African experiences in language use and what you know about the Philippines thus far, especially from what our discussion has been so far. Okay, so 2 things, all right? What has struck you as a group? What sort of insight, theoretical insight, siguro, that struck you about the nature of language, how we understand language, all right? And number 2, parallelism. I'm sure there are countless and countless of parallel examples that we can have between African countries and the Philippines. I'll probably give you 10 minutes to do that. It will just be random breakout rooms, no? I'll just create 3. Okay, so I'll come back and we will come back in about 10 minutes. Okay, 1, 2, 3. No, actually, ano lang. Okay, let me see. Hold on.
8 po sila, sir.
Kaya nga, yeah, 8 nga. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lang actually.
Ay,
Yes, Lloyd. Yes, Lloyd.
Doc, I apologize. Nasa province po ako ngayon. I just arrived. And the signal is not that great. Medyo nag-stop ako, but I'll try to wade it through because I'm really interested sa topic. I
Okay,
I even missed the class of Doc Tupas. I'm Doc the previous doctor. So,
sige.
Yeah.
Sige. Okay lang. Let me just do it again. All right. Kasi yung nakapasok kasi yung yung PUP Zoom. Okay, so let me just simply do it this way. Okay. Okay. All right. So dito, teka lang. How do we assign Ryan to?
Hi, sir. Hi,
Hello,
ma'am.
Ryan.
Just
Yeah, they are
finished
in.
our meeting, our training session with my colleagues and my HOD. What happened, sir?
Okay. Doon nasa group discussion sila now actually. Let me see where the teka lang, tingnan ko kung yung the group discussion. Um,
Ang wala ngayon si Sir Sinath, Nathaniel. Ano Sinath eh?
o nga, teka lang, yun muna yung ano yung course. How do I put Ryan in the room?
Is there a breakout room, sir, that I can click so I can add
Yes,
myself? I can join.
kaya nga so kaya
So,
nga
room 3
dapat
siguro, sir. Join room
yeah, room 3. But do
Tingnan
you
ko,
have a
sir.
3 there?
Meron po.
Nakitaan mo na sarili mo, nakita meron nga, pero how do I put him there, or how can he put himself there?
Kita mo, Ryan, yung breakout room.
There, I hear, ma'am, the host open breakout rooms. Please wait for to be assigned.
Kaya nga,
Wala
so how do
po ngayon, ma'am and sir, unfortunately.
kaya nga, how do we assign
Sir,
him?
assign to room 3. Ako na po, sir.
Ay, ikaw na?
Ayan.
Ba't,
Okay na
ba't
po,
wala
ma'am and
akong
sir.
Okay,
Join na po.
nawawala-wala si Lloyd. Ayun, Lloyd is back.
Sarap ng daldalan. So, okay. Umiinit pa lang po, Doc Tupas, yung aming discussion. Pero
I
sige,
know. Sige, alam ko, pero kasi
sige ba.
iinit din yung discussion natin dito.
Sige ba.
Marami pa. All right,
Hindi po,
so yeah. Sige
sige
nga,
po.
Algin. What do
No,
you mean? What?
I was going to say hindi po ako makapag-open ng camp kasi pag nag-open po ako, nawawala na po ako sa internet. Medyo malakas ang ano po
Oh,
namin
sige,
ngayon.
okay lang. Okay, sige, okay lang. All right, sige, let's start with your group actually because you're group 1. Okay,
Sige
so
po.
just consolidate what you have discussed. Ano yung sinasabi mong umiinit pa lang?
Opo, kasi in our discussion we went into the details, or we went into what was the study all about, the method, the findings, and basically it pointed out four viewpoints that we would want to share to the class today. Number one
Mm,
is that students, the paper uh, allows us to realize that in their study, students actively participate in the co-construction of meaning through translanguaging. No, the paper actually puts forth its argument that students actually play a very active and vital role in constructing and co-constructing meaning during the discussions by using translanguaging. No, and this of course involves the mixing of languages as it is supported by the observations that students translanguaging would influence the teacher's translanguaging. I am trying to imagine nga po while I was reading this, and probably all my classmates would have imagined it too, no, na in the classroom, unlike probably how I experienced English to be taught inside my class, in these classrooms, uh, students were given a free hand on how they would be able to really express themselves, be it in their native language or in English. And that to me is a very good uh, addition, no, to language learning, no, kasi it tends to not only utilize one language, not only proliferates one language, which is the lingua franca sa English classroom, but also the use of other languages, more particularly that of the native language po. Another point that we made mention in the discussion would be that translanguaging, based on the paper, translanguaging, excuse me, facilitates understanding and, of course, language acquisition. As the paper might suggest, no, the use of translanguaging inside the classroom in fact enhances students' understanding and language acquisition. We have might probably read in the paper that teachers trans-language utterances, which mixes English with Filipino, no? The interrogative pronouns, adverbs, phrases, as well as the Chabacano equivalents, no? Would really help students realize that the things realize that things have actually names in different languages, no? And this practice would now align with the finding that using first language or L1 can actually aid in understanding the second language uh, words L2, no? And this is of course in line now with uh, yung nauna nating, kasi ngayon po, na-point out nga po ni Ma'am Carissa during the discussion, no, na papalitan na naman yung educational system with some other system, and we are unsure if mother tongue language education, MTBLE po ba tawag natin dyan sa basic ed, would still be utilized, no? But this study proves that the use of mother tongue actually increases and enhances language learning, no? Thirdly, translanguaging promotes cultural and linguistic diversity, no? And to me this is very important, sir, personally, because I know for a fact that Filipinos today are Filipino mentality today is highly colonialized. We could not neglect the fact, no? But with translanguaging, I think we could preserve culture, no, of whatever is left of it, and probably eventually in the coming days, no, or in the future, we could give a rebirth of our culture. The paper highlights the very importance of translanguaging in promoting cultural and linguistic diversity. I think if we can consider having so many different languages in the Philippines a blessing, I believe it would have to be something we would need to really preserve, no? Because this reflects who we are as a people, as a nation, no? We would need to point out that by acknowledging and incorporating different languages in the classrooms, no, students are exposed to, well, the richness of our languages. We have multiple languages and multiple cultures at that, no? And finally, translanguaging supports engagement and of course, no, increases interaction in the classroom. As mentioned in the paper, sir, translanguaging enhances students' engagement, no? Because it encourages students to respond in different languages and tends to prompt them to think about the colors, the names, the characteristics of objects in their respective languages. So we should not forget that the classroom included in this study are a great mix of diverse languages, no? So this practice is not only facilitating language learning, but also, no, and more importantly, encourages participation, critical thinking, and by incorporating translanguaging practices in the classroom, we as educators could actually promote a more inclusive and engaging learning environment fitted for a country that is an archipelago. Thank you po.
That's right. Salamat, Algin. I wonder, Clarissa and Sarah, if you can add something and anything that you would like to contribute to the discussion, that's siguro you can you have time now to do that, right? Is there anything else you want to continue with the conversation with? Clarissa and Sarah?
I believe Doc Algin has already mentioned all of what we have discussed po.
Yes.
Concisely. Thank you po, Doc.
Okay, sige.
Thank
All
you
right,
po.
so maraming salamat. Well, ang interesting dyan actually, no, sa discussion ninyo, is that you look at translanguaging here, of course, in the context, for example, of pedagogy and in the context of education. And let's, naisip ko na no, and siguro kayo rin, no, and some of you, naisip ko na para as siguro as English teachers, some of us, or if not all of us here, are teachers of English, or at least speakers of English, or involved in any sort of in any way, directly or indirectly, in the teaching of English, right? Marami ng marami ng pumapasok sa utak ngayon, 'di ba? So, paano na 'yun? Paano na yung yung English na 'yan? Paano na yung yung classroom ko, 'di ba? Parang ang daming mga ang tawag doon, hindi lang confusion actually, but somehow the very idea that translanguaging actually works in the English classroom, parang it attacks you, di ba? It attacks you. Parang hindi mo, kaagad, hindi mo kaagad yan matatanggap eh. Kasi, but I think that's the very point of this whole concept, of translanguaging, that it actually, kung sa atin pa, it contests your own language ideologies. All right? Bakit ganun yung response mo kaagad? 'Di ba? Wag na natin muna tagalin muna natin yung pagiging, yung kung anong kailangan nating gawin, ano yung mga practical implications. Tanggalin muna natin 'yan. All right? Isipin muna natin, bakit ganun yung reaction natin? 'Di ba? Bakit ganun yung pag-respond natin to the very idea of translanguaging? Kasi hindi ba the whole time sa language teacher education, sa teacher training, even actually now, 'di ba? Translanguaging is frowned upon. All right? It's frowned upon. Tapos all of a sudden, hindi man all of a sudden, but increasingly we learn about empirically driven work that actually, makes us rethink these practices. At sabihin natin, okay pala siya. 'Di ba? Pero bakit parang there's something that is withholding us from really totally accepting it and embracing it? I mean, there are so many reasons, but the very point is that there is that response. Ganyan yung response natin. And hopefully, that is a way to somehow critically reflect on our own ideologies. Siguro dahil ganun yung ideolohiya natin, na hindi dapat magsama-sama yung mga lengguwahe. 'Di ba? And I have more to say about this, but I'll leave it, for example, later muna sa group 2 and 3 para hindi ko naman ma-anticipate lahat ng gusto nilang gawin. So maraming salamat, group 1 and Algin. Group 2? Sino you have Chriselle, Jordan, and Zaide.
Hello po, good afternoon, Dr. Lupas.
Hello. Hi, hello. Magandang araw.
Magandang araw po. Hindi po kami natapos ng sharing kanina kasi medyo nag-extend po kami. But then I'll try to present some of the key points po. But I think mamaya po mas may maganda yata ang sasabihin si Ma'am Zaide kasi po nakita niya talaga siya ay from public school at sabi po niya tatanggalin na nga daw po ang MTB-MLE. But then ayun po, ito pong translanguaging in multilingual third grade ESL classroom in Mindanao. I am familiar with the author kasi if I'm not mistaken, siya din po yung sumulat sa Linguistic Landscape, si Robbie Atilano. And here it was clearly stated that translanguaging is really beneficial for both the teachers and the students. It was definitely mentioned that teachers can use translanguaging when it comes to presenting the lesson, eliciting students' responses. And same with the students, no? They can participate well in the classroom and they can accomplish the assessment better. But what struck me the most is that the part where it is said that for the two teachers involved, the use of translanguaging serves as a bridge to their students' learning of English which establishes the use of translanguaging as a mediating tool between teacher and student. Um, may part po doon that they were asked whether they are conscious or whether they're aware that they are doing the translanguaging or not. And the teachers mentioned that they are aware actually. But for the students, since they're not really, into or they're not really familiar with the concept of translanguaging, for them it comes naturally. With that, the translanguaging is actually helping the students to be better with their academics. As presented in the research, yung NAT results po is a good example that if the students cannot, no matter how knowledgeable the students are when it comes to the content, but if they cannot understand the instructions, the questions, or even the statements itself, talaga po makaka-apekto yon sa kanila. And that would be for my part po. I think si Ma'am Zaidi po, maganda din po yung sinabi niya tungkol sa MTBMLE. Ma'am Zaidi po.
Sige, salamat. Yeah. Hi, Zaide.
Good afternoon po, and good afternoon to everyone.
Magandang araw.
Actually, si ma'am has rather already summarized, okay, what we have discussed, but I have just something to add. I think this is since the study is conducted or was conducted rather, or the settings of the study is in Mindanao, and it has stated here that the regional languages are included to be part of the language in the translingual practice. These languages are, we have here the Chabacano, the Filipino, Cebuano, Tausug, as well rather as English. So the role of the teacher here as a multilingual individual, he or she needs to accommodate all the languages. So for example, when the teacher, it says here that translanguaging is beneficial to both students and teachers. So for example, in the part of eliciting or affirming responses from the students. Some of the students may use Tausug, some of the students may use Chabacano, and some would use English. But the good thing here is that the teacher could be able to accommodate these languages. So here in Manila, most of the language, or most of the we can say the translanguaging practice here. So for example, in the context of bilingual context, they are just going to use Filipino and English only. Unlike in this particular study, that it uses different languages to accommodate the students' needs. But as what I have shared to our break session a while ago, that it is sad in my part that they are planning, or they have the provision that the MTBMLE will be removed. It's because of the reason we have the linguistic diversity, and the Department of Education maybe could be able to resolve the issue on this. So for example po, in Mindanao, so for example in Zamboanga, yung naka-institutionalize doon or tinalagang regional language na gagamitin ay Chabacano. However, yung mga students coming from the different area in Mindanao, they are transferring to the particular school. So mahirap nga po naman. Kaya nga po, may problem pa talaga sa ating policy, in the language policy. And another thing is, yung reason nila na kulang daw po ng fund, kulang ng instructional materials talaga. So nakakalungkot na 10 years na yung implementation ng MTBMLE ay hindi pa rin po na-resolve. So that's all po.
Salamat, Saide, Chriselle also, and the entire group. No, interesting. I think I mentioned this last semester, no, but I have to emphasize this again. Nung early 1900s, when the start of American colonialism, American colonial education, all right, and when English, then was imposed as the sole medium of instruction, all right. There were concerns na ganito rin mga concerns. And so there were also critical voices even early on during the American colonial era, all right? Voices in terms of the need, bakit isusuppress yung mga vernacular languages, all right? Yung mga dialects nga, ganon ang sinasabi, all right? Pero nangibabaw syempre yung English, yung English as a medium of instruction. Now, I mentioned that, all right, and I think this is something that everyone should also, be able to listen to, all right? I mentioned that kasi noong more than 100 years ago, all right, isa sa mga dahilan kung bakit English dapat at hindi mga Philippine languages ay kasi walang instructional materials, walang budget, all right? So, imagine mo more than 100 years ago, gagamitin ulit, ginamit yung ganong klaseng idea na wala kasi instructional materials kaya doon na lang tayo sa English kasi maraming instructional materials. So if you really come to think of it, the Philippines has had more than 100 years to prepare those materials. Kaya hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na ngayon sasabihin na ulit natin na kasi walang materials. Kasi nga hindi naman talaga tinututukan yung materials. If we invest money in materials production, if we invest money, if put our money in, let's say in, writing materials, training teachers in writing materials, even mga local materials halimbawa, di magkakaroon. There will be. All right? Kasi hindi naman talaga kasi ginugusto. Well, maraming confidential funds, yun nga. Tapos yung issue ngayon is yung mga decoration. Doon tayo nakatutok sa mga decoration, which in the first place, if you realize, binabasa ko kasi Zara yung comment mo. If you have read the news recently, today or yesterday, na allowed naman yung Christmas decorations, 'di ba? So the argument na tanggalin lahat yung decorations kasi nakaka-distract sa attention ng mga bata falls flat din naman on this whole idea that Christmas decorations are also allowed even temporarily. Kahit naman temporary yan, magdi-distract din yan kung yan yung ano natin, di ba? But the point here really is actually bigger than that, and that's the reason why I also somehow highlighted that. Kasi mga policies natin sa edukasyon, alright, hindi talaga siya empirically driven. Like halimbawa, sasabihin na lang kasi baka madidistract yung mga estudyante, yung mga transactions. But what does the research say? Alright? The research says na merong mga visuals na nakaka-distract at meron namang visuals na hindi nakaka-distract at in fact nakakatulong. Especially in younger years where cognitive science tells you that kailangan ng stimulation ng mga bata. Kaya tingnan natin, di ba, yung mga even around, you need colors around for the young ones. Kasi doon dapat kumukuha ng interest yung mga bata. Like for example, sa research, sinasabi din, even quotes ng mga inspirational, mga inspirational people, they can actually be helpful. Alright? Nakalagay dun sa research that they can also be helpful. Yung mga certain formulas, halimbawa, that are very basic in maths or probably in science, nakakatulong din yan. Alright? So merong mga decoration, merong mga visual aids around the classroom na kailangang tanggalin at kailangang hindi tanggalin kasi nakakatulong siya sa pag-stimulate ng minds, pag-stimulate ng thinking ng mga bata at ng mga estudyante. Alright? But the thing is, decisions are not made by researchers, by educational, and a lot of those decisions are made basically on political grounds. The same thing with MTB MLE. Kaya sinabi ni Zaide kanina, alright? Walang instructional materials. Totoo yan. Pero what is the way forward? Ang way forward is not to go back to something that is problematic. The way forward is to invest money into these weaknesses para ma-augment. Kaya nga sinasabi ko last time, 'di ba? Last week sa session natin, all right? Kung tama tayo, 'di ba? Sa mga ganitong pananaw, tama yung mga politiko natin sa ganitong pananaw about bringing back English, tanggalin yung mother tongue, sana tayo na yung globally competitive. Ay yung mga globally competitive, even economically, sila yung gumagamit ng mother tongues. Sila yung gumagamit they actually use their own local languages, all right? At least one, yung national language nila as the language of instruction, for example, their own mother tongues as well. Pero tayo, pilit nating nilalayo yung mga estudyante natin at yung mga bata natin. All right? So, going back to our discussion on translanguaging, kaya ko sinasabi itong yung mga lahat na ito, mga idea is precisely because the very notion of translanguaging attacks us. All right? The very notion of translanguaging somehow demolishes many of our language ideologies. All right? So, wala man tayong mga research or anything, let's assume na hindi natin alam. But the very idea, no, that the very idea that translanguaging works and is acceptable and should be embraced. All right? Iba kaagad yung dating. Iba kaagad yung dating sa atin, ibang dating sa mga tao, sa mga teachers especially. All right? Bakit? Kasi nga, nakahubog tayo doon sa mga languages, sa idea or ideologies sa language, kung saan, alright, sinusuppress yung mga ganitong mga supposedly transformative ways in education. Kaya nang hinighlight kanina ni Algin at yung grupo din nila, alright, yung a translanguaging like any strategy, for example, or any particular use of language whatsoever, is there meant to help you become a better teacher. All right? Paulit-ulit natin tong isipin. All right? That what translanguaging actually helps us to do is to get us to rethink, all right, what we know about language. And at the same time, how what we know about language now can actually help us become more effective as teachers. So sinabi ulit ni Algin, kung nakakatulong sa pag-aaral ng English, gawin mo. Kung hindi nakakatulong, huwag mong gawin kasi there are certain tasks siguro, alright? Halimbawa, yung task mo, yung function mo, for example is, you're talking to a foreigner, alright? Let's say a tourist, di ba? A tourist. Eh siguro, iba yung demand for what needs to be competent in that particular situation kasi you're talking to particular speakers that would have certain needs as well, all right? Pero just to have a blanket, all right, blanket policy that says no, and I know that kasi mga principals, mga supervisors are themselves already, wala nang kailangang isipin pa. May umiiyak minsan ng mga bata na pupunta sa akin, nagme-message. Kasi parang akala nila progressive, transformative yung ginagawa nila. And true enough, transformative siya kasi nag-engage yung mga estudyante, mas naintindihan ng mga estudyante yung mga konsepto. Pero from the point of view of the observer, from the point of view of the supervisor, wala yun, hindi yun lahat importante. Ang importante, mali ka kasi nag-translanguage ka. 'Di ba? So, saan pumapasok yung effectiveness? Kasi hindi na, parang kung sa atin pa, nagkaroon na ng ideological barrier yung mga teachers, lalo na yung mga, yung mga mga decision makers, di ba? Nagkakaroon na ng ideological barrier. Kasi hindi na importante na hindi na nila nakikita na, natututo ng mga estudyante. Alright? Mas naintindihan nila yung mga konsepto. Alright? Kasi kung naintindihan nila yung mga konsepto, then why not? Di ba? Pero hindi yun eh. Ang importante sa kanila ay, naku, gumamit siya ng local language. Mabuti nga kung sinabi pa niyang local language, sasabihin pa niya yan, local dialect. Alright? Mamaya, babalikan natin yan. Di ba? So, that's the sad state of decision making that we have in the schools and even nationally as well. All right, that a lot of the decisions that are being made are made by people who don't have high regard for research, who don't have high regard for what exactly are the facts there. They make decisions based on gut. All right, eh kung gut yan, very ideological yan. All right, parang gut feel ko lang yan, very ideological. You know, kasi sasabihin, kasi we need English because we need English kasi we want to be globally competitive. Totoo naman, we need English to be because we want to be globally competitive. Pero kasi gagamitin yun as dahilan para gawin yung English as medium of instruction halimbawa. Magkaiba yan. Iba yung paggamit mo ng English as medium of instruction at yung the very idea that we need English to be globally competitive. 'Di ba? Kasi kung gamitin mo 'yun to change policy, mas lalo kang hindi maging globally competitive. Kasi nga, the research shows otherwise. All right? That translanguaging, the use of local languages, these things are necessary. All right? Especially early on in the lives of our children. Why? Because they need to be cognitively mature. Ang ibig sabihin nun, yung tamang pag-iisip, yung mga skills sa brain, all right? For those of you who might be interested in cognitive linguistics, halimbawa, language in the brain, all right? Pinapakita doon na when, the children begin with their own language, all right? And begin it well and become actually very good at it, yung mga skills nila doon, natatransfer. Alright? Natatransfer doon sa pag-aaral ng iba. Alright? So imagine ngayon, alright, hindi na nga sila competent sa sarili nilang lengguwahe, hindi pa sila competent sa English, tapos gagamitin mo pa yung English halimbawa sa pagtuturo. So, hindi sila competent sa lahat. Hindi sila competent sa English, hindi sila competent sa local language, at hindi rin sila tututo ng content sa science halimbawa at sa math. Bakit? Kasi nga, nakulangan sa pag-explain yung teacher. Kasi nga, hindi naintindihan ng mga bata. Bakit? Kasi nga, binawal yung paggamit ng local languages. So, ang dami niyan. I'm not sure if I mentioned this to you, but I think I should, it's best repeating, no? In 2019, yung result ng yung regional survey, yung reading poverty, learning poverty ng mga estudyante, I think grade 9 ba? Yeah, grade 9. Ang baba-baba ng Pilipinas, it's 9 out of 10. Okay? I'll give you some time to think about it. All right? I'll give it a pause. All right? 9 out of 10 grade 9 Filipinos, all right, struggle with reading. That's a 2019 study. Let's try to let it sink in. 9 out of 10 Filipinos, all right, struggle, all right. Teka lang, Lowell, I think is having problems. Yeah. Are struggle with reading. And for comparison, all right, Indonesia, I think probably 6 out of 9, which is still bad, di ba? And ito yun, just less than 2, 1 to 2 out of 10 ng grade 9 students ng Vietnam, those are the ones who only struggle with reading. So imagine mo Vietnam compared sa Philippines, all right? Nagsa-struggle 9 out of 10 ang mga grade 9 students sa pagbabasa. Pero yung mga Vietnamese, at the most dalawa lang out of 10 nagsa-struggle. Less than 20% struggle in reading. All right? The Thais, the Indonesians, 'di ba? Mas mababa 'yan. I think siguro comparable tayo sa Laos or even Cambodia. So yun na yung level natin. All right? Tapos we want to be globally competitive. All right? So there's something terribly, terribly wrong with, the focus of our education system. There's something terribly, terribly wrong with the way the entire education system is being handled. All right? We really need, much more empirically driven. And that's the reason why, all right, like conversations like this one are really very important for us kasi at least tayo, sabihin kasi natin, so huge yung problema. Pero ako sa tinitingnan ko to kasi this way within our own spaces, within our own little spaces, sa sarili nating classrooms, sa mga estudyante natin, pwede din, mayroon tayong magagawa para mabago yung pag-iisip ng mga estudyante natin at natin din. Alright? At hopefully yung mga co-teachers natin. Because that's how we can actually have a trickling down effect on what the conversations are like in this particular class, for example. Kailangan natin kasi if we look at what's happening out there, parang feeling natin we are immobilized by the immensity of the problem. Wala tayong magagawa hindi tayong decision maker. Yun nakikita ko sa social media. Anong gagawin natin? 'Di ba? Ganyan na lang 'yan. Wala naman tayong magagawa. Alright, sumunod na lang tayo. Hindi pwedeng ganun, 'di ba? As educators, yun nga ginagawa natin. Halimbawa, sinabi kanina ni Zaide, tinanggal yung mother tongue based, yung mother tongues. Okay, wala tayong magagawa nga talaga doon kasi hindi tayo yung decision maker, di ba? Pero in our own classes, ang focus pa rin natin dapat ay paano matututo ang mga estudyante. Di ba? At kung yung translanguaging at kung yung the use of L1 can help na matuto ang mga estudyante, why not? 'Di ba? Before I go to group 3, I did not forget you, no? Kasi I'm sure you also have things to say. I just want to I just remembered one thing sa experience ko sa Singapore, because for those of you who don't know, before coming to the UK several years ago, I was in Singapore. I studied, I lived, had family in Singapore for 20 years. All right. And one of the core things that I experienced in Singapore, of course, in my professional life, was having taught at the National Institute of Education. At dito sa National Institute of Education kasi yun yung the only teacher training institution sa buong Singapore. So lahat ng teachers generally dadaan dapat ng training sa amin sa National Institute of Education. All right? Now, meron akong kwento sa inyo na ganito nangyari. Meron isang teacher, kasi when I talk about these things kasi, yung iba naman yung parang yung make-up doon ng discussions sa Singapore. Kasi they're talking about what they call the standard Singapore English, all right? And yung Singlish. Magkaiba yon. Magkaiba yung standard Singapore English sa Singlish. Yung Singapore standard English, madidinig mo yung accent, Singaporean yung accent, pero very audible, very comprehensible siya in the international scene, di ba? Pero pagdating sa Singlish, this is the colloquial, the informal colloquial English. So dito na naghalo-halo. Dito na yung tinasabi nating halo-halo na. Meron itong English na ito, meron ng Hokkien, meron ng Malay, meron ng Tamil, meron ng Hindi, and many other Chinese languages. Pumasok to lahat to the point na kung sa atin pa, naging isang vernacular language na siya. So parang hindi na siya pwedeng sabihin na variety of English, kasi pag Singlish na yung papakinggan mo, hindi mo na siya maintindihan kung hindi ka Singlish speaker. Alright? So para bang iba na talaga yung system of rules kasi naghalo-halo na siya doon. Pero mababa yung tingin ng tao sa Singlish, even by the government. So ganun din yung ginagawa halos ng government, na Ministry of Education. binabawalan yung mga teachers to use Singlish. Although sa research ko nga, maraming beses talagang nagsisinglish yung mga teachers. So there was one time, I was talking about nga itong mga pinag-usapan natin, how local languages, local practices actually can facilitate the learning of the students. All right? Bigla na lang siyang umiyak, right? Bigla na lang siyang umiyak. Sabi ko, bakit ka umiyak? And actually, this was the first time na may umiyak sa klase ko. Especially kasi in their case na talagang sobrang bawal. Kung pag bawal, bawal. Alright? So nagkwento siya. Kasi ang nangyari pala is, at one point, inassignan siya ng isang klase na to prepare for isang klase from an underprivileged classroom, kasi itong grupo na to ng mga estudyante we're preparing for the primary school leaving examination. So parang primary 6, so mag-prepare na sila for the exam. So they were primary 5 pa lang, no? Pero itong grupo na ito, alright, itong grupo na ito, wala man lang 10% ang nakakapasa sa writing. Alright? And writing is a huge part of in the English exam. Pag bagsak mo 'yon, mahirapan ka nang maka-recover. Alright? Walang nakakapasa, in other words, I think it's 40 out of 100 yung passing eh. So everyone 90% were below 10, below 40 for 40 marks. So the school basically wanted her to take over. Baka pwede mong gawa ng paraan. Alright? Paano mo, matulungan itong mga estudyante nito kasi siguradong babagsakin. These are from disadvantaged. So in other words, yung linguistic repertoire nila, hindi yung standard linguistic repertoire. So to cut the story short, ang ginawa niya the following many months, halimbawa, was yung mga rules ng grammar sa writing, yung paano at saka yung grammar at kung paano mag-organize at kung paano halimbawa bakit mali yung mali yung pagkasulat nila, all right? And especially halimbawa yung pagka-explain niya bakit ganito yung sentence mo, all right? Lahat na ito gumamit siya ng Singlish, all right? Na actually bawal, 'di ba? Singlish kasi bawal. Pero ginamit niya para i-explain sa mga estudyante paano mag-organize, ano yung thesis statement halimbawa, bakit ito yung structure mo, kasi in-explain niya ito yung structure mo kasi sa Singlish ganito. Pero kung sa standard Singapore English, ganito dapat yung so in-explain niya, pinag-compare niya, pinag-analyze niya. In other words, gumamit siya ng Singlish to be able to help them write, in English. Diba? Then the test came, and what happened was from 10%, umabot ng 80% ng mga estudyante ang pumasa sa writing. Okay? So from 10 to 80%. So syempre naging toast of the town siya, 'di ba? I mean, parents really, were ecstatic kasi imagine, these are from underprivileged families. Parang wala nang future eh kasi pag buwagsak ka sa doon ka mapupunta sa pinaka least desirable nila na eskwelahan, 'di ba? And nakapasa sila from 10 to 80%. Ang kasi dito, this is kasi the story behind this, no? Kung bakit umiyak yung estudyante ko. This is, a postgraduate student. Kasi nung graduation na, parang an awarding ceremonies kasi ginawa siya ng binigyan siya ng excellent teacher award eh. So binigyan siya ng opportunity to go in front to talk about, her experience. All right? From her, sa kanya, experience niya is this. The very reason kung bakit, all right, the very reason kung bakit nag-improve ang mga estudyante kasi naintindihan nila kung paano sila dapat magsulat. Naintindihan nila kung bakit ganito ang sentence nila at kung magsusulat sila, ibahin nila dito kasi nga yung structure ng Singlish iba sa structure ng sentence sa standard Singapore English. Alright? Alam niya na iyon yung core kasi naintindihan ng mga estudyante at therefore nakapasa sila. Right? Can you imagine from 10% to 80% eventually making it to, a normal mainstream school? 'Di ba? Pero nung nasa stage na siya, pina-explain sa kanya, pinakinausap siya paano niya na-handle yung ganong klaseng mga difficult challenges sa classroom. Right? Sinabi lang niya, sabi na, well, you have to be, you need to be a committed teacher. You need to spend time with students, with my pupils. I actually treated my pupils, as individuals, all right, na may kanya-kanyang sariling mga challenges sa buhay, may kanya-kanyang sariling challenges sa academic life, halimbawa. But there was no mention of Singlish. All right? Kaya siya na umiyak kasi the class actually parang she felt that it was an empowering moment for her na actually tama pala yung ginawa niya at hindi pala dapat ikinahiya. Kaso the language ideologies of the school, the language ideologies of the institutions, all right, basically were ganging up on her and basically telling her, no, you cannot use Singlish and you cannot mention Singlish. Pero actually deep inside her, yun ang nagpabigay ng bagong buhay supposedly sa mga bata. 80 percent of the students, di ba? No, it took me quite some time to discuss this kasi ito yung pwedeng sagot kay Zaide. Ito yung pwedeng sagot sa atin lahat na wala naman tayong pwedeng gawin. Meron tayong pwedeng gawin. May not necessarily be grand and transformative in a national scale, pero within our own spaces, pwede nating gawin. Kasi for as long as our main pedagogical principle is paano ba matututo ang mga estudyante? 'Di ba? Paano ba matututo ang mga estudyante? All right? And then we bring in all the potential resources. Okay. Let's move on to group 3. What are your thoughts?
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, good
Nathaniel, yes.
afternoon po.
Hello.
All right. So, I think majority of the points of the study naman po were already given by group 1 and group 2. So, I think let's just go to the part of our discussion that we reflected on each other's experiences and practices po. So, given that the two of us are teachers in DepEd and then Sir Lloyd explored on a study similar with our current situation. So I shared po on our discussion how I think I've always said this in our classes that in my current school in Binyan is like, how do I say this? There are a lot of immigrants in my context because we have the Techno Park po in Binyan, and then a lot of Filipinos from different towns, different cities, they migrate to Binyan because of the job opportunities there. And of course, yun po yung reason kung bakit may linguistic diversity po dun sa part namin sa Binyan. So of course, given that there is linguistic diversity, they could only unify in communication through English and Tagalog lang po. Kaya lang po syempre, I think we've also discussed this last week that in the Philippines, there's still this misconception that Tagalog or Filipino is a higher language than other Filipino languages po. So if yung mga students magsasalita sila with regional accent, medyo napapahiya sila kasi napagtatawanan sila in class. Ganun po. And then I also shared po upon our reflection how considering that there are 50 students for each classroom po sa setting ko po sa Binyan, teaching English is one thing, but disciplining while teaching these students English is another thing po. So frankly speaking, I think nagagawa rin naman to ng ibang teachers tong mistake na to na kapag ka sobrang ingay na talaga ng students, sometimes we tend to reprimand the students by saying wala na ako ibang maririnig na salita sa klase ko kundi English lang. Kapag hindi kayo nag-English, manahimik kayo. And then sometimes ito pong pagre-reprimand na to, it affects the students as well kasi when they're trying to participate and to answer in class, they become pressured thinking, am I allowed to answer this question in Filipino, or okay lang ba na kapag nag-answer ako sa question na to in Tagalog muna tapos itatranslate ko afterwards sa English, or could I use Taglish to answer this question? So those are some reflections po that I was able to share. And Sir Ryan po was also able to share some of his experiences in DepEd. Sir?
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you,
sir.
Nathaniel.
If you allow me to share some of my insights with regards to the sharing, the brainstorming that we did a while ago. So let me commence with or on sharing my insights with a little background of our country, which has been tackled also from the sharers. So the Philippines is known as an archipelagic country and was first inhabited by various indigenous peoples who had their own unique cultures. Later on, the country was colonized by Spain, the US, and Japan, each leaving their own mark on the culture and identity of the country. Furthermore, the Philippines is a country of islands, which archipelagic in its sense, and each island or region has its own unique culture, languages, and traditions. So this diversity is celebrated and recognized by the government, which recognizes the importance of cultural heritage and promotes diversity and inclusion. This resulted to multilingual country, and I would like to accentuate my points that would adhere to utilization and adaptation of translanguaging in the Philippine schools. First, various schools that are known to be multilingual schools should assess the teachers and learners multilingual or mother tongues or home language. This way, we can teach the target language English effectively. This is not to remove English, rather teaching English through the teachers and learners' mother tongues, and it will result into acknowledging the multilingual settings, which we should utilize the translanguaging for the learners to succeed in their various tasks. However, in this note, as a teacher, of course, if I'm going to teach in Mindanao, just like in the material, the reading material that I've read, it gives me the idea of I need to learn Chabacano, I need to learn the other home language of the learners who are living there. So that is something that is challenging in the part of teachers or teachers who will be teaching across the archipelagic lands in our country. My second point here is let students translanguage in the classroom be able to participate in activities. In this case, DepEd should accentuate this in our curriculum. Let us dismantle the idea of Anglophone. I am not disagree. I'm as a matter of fact, I'm guilty here because I am teaching grade 12 and I let my students to speak the target language. So I give them the impression of having an Anglophone classroom. But well, in fact, I realized that this is not effective because there are some points, there are some challenges that students encountered. They may know the answer, but they cannot express themselves. So I think translanguaging should dismantle the idea of the Anglophone in the Philippines. This way, we are giving the avenue, we are giving a vehicle of acknowledging that it's now the perfect time to acknowledge that there are many languages in the Philippines. And these languages are not dialects nor inferior languages. Furthermore, in my example, it is not because students refrain from participating in the class make them inept or incapable of answering the questions. Even teachers who use teaching techniques, namely probing questions, it does not mean that they do not know the answer. It doesn't mean that they are victims of rote learning. It could be that they are not being taught the target language in their home language or mother tongues as auxiliary language or scaffold. Third, learners could communicate effectively since they are using their innate way to communicate. It's like we are not giving them an authoritarian settings or an authoritative atmosphere. We make our students free in sharing their ideas in their most comfortable language that they know. Example, international pageants. We know that most of the candidates are inviting what do you call this one? Someone who will translate them, but they are using their own language. So if in international pageants we allow it, why can't we allow it, of course, inside of the classroom or in the schools in the Philippines? And lastly, languaging serves as a bridges the gaps between teachers and learners themselves. So teachers should encourage learners not only to use their mother tongues or home language, but also to normalize the idea that there is no such dialects or inferior language. These are all Philippine languages. That's all, sir.
Salamat, Ryan. Before I respond to you, actually, Lloyd, do you have something to say? I mean, are you able to say right now? Pabalik-balik ka?
Yes. I hopefully I won't get cut off. Um, I went outside the box. I've told this because this is kind of related to my thesis when I was in MA. I mean, when I was in MA. What am I talking about? I haven't had any sleep. Just came home. When I did during my MA. I just came home from, so I don't know.
Sige lang,
The
kaya mo
problem
yan.
I saw was that the problem I saw was, what if is translingualism the soul, or the hope of the future? So that was the idea, and then I tried to be the devil's advocate, and then tried to check the weakness of this approach. And the weakness itself went to my thesis when I was in MA, because what I discovered is that the language itself became the affective filter for them not to actually learn the language, the English language itself. And one of the main points that I also noticed, and the others noticed, would be, we are thinking that in a classroom, the English or the English language is the ESL, but sometimes it isn't. It could be the EFL, and then Tagalog could actually be the ESL. So there are a lot of things that I wanted to discuss with my group mates, but we didn't have time, and I might have gone too far away from what the paper was saying. Although I do agree with what was said, however, I was focused more on, is this it? Is this the solution to language learning and embracing the dialects or the languages, sorry for that term, the languages in the Philippines? But ultimately, what I have learned as well was that um, we could use translingualism in other subjects, but there could be a potential danger if we are teaching a certain target language. That's the thing that I've noticed, which also has been voiced by other researchers. I don't know, kind of
No,
confused right
yes.
there, but
No,
yeah.
it's okay, Lloyd. That is fine. I mean, it's good that, all these things are always raised, kasi nga, mas maganda yan, we talk about it and we raised it. But before I respond to that, Algin, you raise your hand?
Yes, sir. I just like to share, sir, kasi uh, I graduated my elementary years in a Chinese school where I had to learn how to speak Chinese. No, so looking back now, kung saan ako mas natuto, kung sa teacher ko na pure Chinese lang kami sa class, or doon sa teacher ko who would at times really really explain it to us in Filipino, mas naintindihan ko yung language nung tinatranslate na niya eh. And then I was able to eventually uh, become more and more proficient in the language, and would able to understand other teachers as well, because someone else is using a language that's familiar to me, no, when I was young. Kaya kasi before po no, pinapasala ko sa mga declamation, oration, pinapa-memorize sa akin yung kung ano-anong Chinese words, ganyan, dire-diretso lang. Siguro kaya ko siya memorize, pero yung naintindihan ko, the level of understanding is not really present. No, looking back at how I experienced it. But when I had that teacher during my third grade, na ina-explain niya, oh, this is what is meant by this, no? Sasabihin niya sa Chinese, oh, ito yan, ito yan. Hindi na lang ako nakabase sa picture. Kasi po yung unang learning ko first, yung grade 1 and 2 ko sa picture lang, ito pala siya. This one, since may sentence construction na po ng grade 3, 4, 5, and 6, naiintindihan ko siya kasi may taong nagpapaliwanag sa akin noong Chinese words na yon or Chinese sentence na yon in a language that I really am able to appreciate. So I think really now, looking at this on how we are discussing the topic, really translanguaging is an amazing thing inside the classroom. Hindi ko lang siguro siya alam noon, pero tama lang din na bigyan natin ng area, no, itong or ng possibility itong translanguaging as part of our pedagogy inside our English classrooms or whatever language classrooms we will be having in the future. Thank you po.
Yeah, thank you, Algin. And in a sense, I'll try to link it up with what Loy said and also earlier, no? Kasi Lloyd, I think the idea with translanguaging is first and foremost that it's there. Hindi yan nawala, except that it is being suppressed precisely because of monolingual practices. Pangalawa, translanguaging and any educational initiative will never be the only reason to help solve problems of language learning and teaching. Walang isa. So translanguageal it's never a panacea. And in fact, when we are talking about yun yung issue nga sa atin dito, when we focus on classroom problems and classroom issues, we focus only on classroom issues and classroom problems. But I think if you look at it in this context, yung problema sa English natin, halimbawa sa Pilipinas, pagtuturo ng English, may problema din sa science, may problema din sa math. All right? So hindi isolated yung problema natin sa pagtuturo ng mga lingwahe. May problema sa buong educational system. So, hindi lang masasagot ng isang bagay, halimbawa ng translanguaging, yung buong problema ng language teaching and learning sa Pilipinas. Ang sinasabi lang dito is translanguaging can open up more possibilities for transformative pedagogies. All right? So yung sinasabi halimbawa na baka sa science at sa math pero bakit sa English, mali pa rin 'yon. Kasi ang point always, let's always go back to this whole point. All right? Paano ba matututo mga estudyante? All right? So sa problema halimbawa ng hindi natuto yung mga estudyante ng English doon sa Lloyd, siguro sa classrooms na nagta-translanguage, hindi problema ng translanguaging 'yon. Ang problema doon ang paggamit ng translanguaging. Because translanguaging has to be strategic. L1 use in science, L1 use in math, L1 use in English or whatever, kung saan man yon, it has to be strategic. In the same way na lahat ng mga resources natin, no? Lahat ng mga teaching resources, dapat strategic yung paggamit. Strategic in the sense na gagamitin mo yun kasi alam mo kung bakit gagamitin mo. At gagamitin mo yun kasi alam mo na makakatulong. So kung makakatulong itong bagay na ito para maintindihan ng mga estudyante ang isang konsepto halimbawa, just think of me. All right? I think all of us are sophisticated learners already. Okay, let's think of me halimbawa. Sa isang presentation, pinapractice ko yung mga presentation ko halimbawa sa isang in international conference. Pinapractice ko yan kasi inuulit ko, ini-explain ko sa sarili ko. All right? May mga bagay na pag na-realize ko while nagpa-practice ako, let's say may isang concept like pluriversality. All right? Pluriversality. Kahit gaano pa kagaling, ka-fluent ako sa English, halimbawa, hindi ko yun mai-explain. Paano ko mai-explain yan? Mai-explain ko yan kung maintindihan ko. So kung maintindihan ko yan, magbabasa ako, magtatanong ako, pag meron na akong enough knowledge on that particular concept, then it translates to more space and more time to be able to talk about it. Alright? So doon nagiging fluent ako. Paano ako makaka-English? Paano ako makaka-fluent? How can we push our students, for example, to talk more about, let's say, pluriversality or kung ano mang konsepto yun o kung ano man yung term na yan sa science, sa math, sa English, halimbawa. Alright? Kung ano man yun o kung anong grammar item. Okay? Anong ibig sabihin ng subject? Anong ibig sabihin ng verb? Kung ano man yan. Alright? Gagamitan mo yan ng iba't ibang klaseng mga strategies. Pa-explain mo yan. Kung hindi nila maintindihan, hindi nila may explain. So yun ang point ng translanguaging. Alright? Translanguaging is not meant, alright, to distract teaching. It is meant to facilitate better teaching. Yun dapat yung tingnan natin. Alright? It is not there as a panacea, as a solution. Hindi pwedeng ganyan kasi never will translanguaging actually claim that it's going to be the solution to all the problems. It's not. Because the problems of teaching and learning and are problems that are beyond the teaching of learning, the teaching of language and the learning of language. It's basic education, it's funding for certain things in education that are more important and that's most important. Lahat yan kailangan. Sasabihin, walang instructional materials, wala namang funds Hindi naman nakatutok doon. Sa decoration nakatutok, halimbawa. Di wala din. Kahit ano pang klaseng translanguaging. That's why we just simply need to take the translanguaging back to us parang as a form of agency. Alright? For us teachers na meron tayong pwedeng gawin despite that ideologies that are empowering, that are disempowering. Na meron tayong pwedeng gawin in our own little spaces, alright? Despite homogenizing policies. Doon naman halimbawa sa sinabi ni Nathaniel kanina, no, which is very, 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 very true, very realistic. Different. The classrooms are very, very linguistically diverse. All right. Ang tanong kasi doon is, sure. Whatever it is, it's always like that. Whatever it is that will make things work, do it. Right? Kasi nga linguistically diverse. Pero, wag naman dapat i-devalue. Kasi ganun nang nangyayari Sasabihin natin linguistically diverse, iba-iba. Pero actually, ang approach ng teacher ay tanggalin yung iba. 'Di ba? So, what if you have certain, like for example, kasi yung language na yan, yung linguistic diversity has got something to do with cultural diversity and also identity. Alright? Identity yan Kaya pag pinagtawanan ng teacher, yung accent ng isang estudyante, alright, magkakascade na yan sa kanya. Tatahimik na yan hanggang sa paglaki niya, i-internalize na niya yan. Yung ganong klaseng inferiority complex, that is language-based, that is accent-based, di ba? So kahit ano pa yan, halimbawa, linguistic diversity, ang tanong parati natin is, how do we embrace linguistic diversity? Do we embrace it in terms of like, everyone's accents are fine, right? Basta communicable, communicative, let's move from there. All right? Para magkaroon ng kanong klaseng interaction sa klase. Para magkaroon ng opportunity yung mga estudyante na magsalita na hindi takot na pagtawanan sila. 'Di ba? Why not, for example, you have a term in English, magbigay ka ng term in English. Halimbawa, 'di ba? Mga few words in English, 'di ba? Magbigay ka ng assignment. Alright? Pag-uwi nila, tanungin nila kung alam nila o hindi nila alam, tanungin nila yung nanay, tatay nila. Ano sa English at ano sa sarili nilang lengguwahe ang itong word na to in English. Tapos pagdating doon, alright, di magbigay sila, isulat mo sa pakita mo how linguistically diverse the Philippines is. Alright? So, it just that little thing, that little assignment, that little example that you can actually do to get the students to bring is an indication that you actually recognize their culture. You recognize their language or languages. All right. So can you imagine, you ask them to come in, and remember, this is also research based. All right. Ano ibig sabihin ng research based? I'll make it simple. All right. if a student is able to say, all right, in my language, I say this. In English, I say that. Pag klaro yan sa estudyante, sa word level, sa structure, sa sentence level, halimbawa, ganito yung pagkasabi, ganito yung pagkasulat yan sa English. Pero sa amin, sa language ko, ganito, so research shows, second language acquisition, that learning is taking place. Alright? Kasi nagkakaroon ng contrastive understanding. Doon sa utak niya, nakikita na niya, alright, ganito pala sa English. Ganito pala sa lengguwahe ko. So nagkakaroon ng cognitive dimension yung pag-aaral. Instead of, mali yan, mali yan, mali yan. So surface level correction. Lagi, di ba? Sa mga sinusulat, mali yan, cross out, cross out, cross out, tapos naka-red pen pa. Pero what are the underlying reasons bakit ganun mali? So potentially, dahil mayroong influence, sinishape siya ng L1 niya. Sinishape siya ng experiences niya sa language ng L1 niya. Right? So, hindi natin na-atake yung mga underlying structural differences kung bakit nagkaroon ng kamalian sa writing nila, 'di ba? So, whereas if you surface those differences, gaya ng sinabi ko, if you surface those differences, all right? Halimbawa, of course I'm simplifying things. Pag let's say ano nga ba? Nakalimutan ko na yung mga aklan words. Let's say for example, ano ang upo or sit down? All right? In English, pungko sa aklanon, 'di ba? Pungko sa aklanon. So someone who is more in aklanon, ma-relate niya, pungko, pungko. So second language acquisition will now tell you that the child will now be able to relate it more directly and more easily to apple instead of upo lang or sit down lang. All right? In other words, dapat merong ganong contrastive understanding ang mga estudyante. This is just another way, just in response to Nathaniel na linguistically diverse. Pero ang linguistically diverse dapat, ito kasi yung point dun before I wrap things up. Linguistic diversity kasi, last like multilingualism, okay? Linguistic diversity kasi should not be seen as a problem. All right? Dapat you start with the assumption na okay, ito padami-dami dito pupunta iba-ibang klaseng mga migrants from different parts. Start with the assumption na it is actually a resource. Resource siya. All right? Resource siya. Gagaan ang buhay mo, gagaan ang loob mo. Instead of just simply thinking, ay problema to, we need to do something about this. Hindi. Ano yung mga resources na meron mga estudyante? Use them to teach English. Simple as that. Alright? O kung kailangan nyo, halimbawa, kasi nga, you can only use English and Tagalog, that's understandable. Hindi naman ibig sabihin nun. Pero as a teacher, okay, a little bit of one of two of these words from these different Philippine languages can actually help a lot in bringing the students into the class, meaning into the discussion, into the dialogue. So linguistic diversity, in other words, should be a way for us as teachers to be open to different possibilities for the students rather than just simply clamp it down. Hindi siya dapat dahilan kung bakit na tanggalin ang linguistically diverse na component sa classroom. Start with the assumption that linguistic diversity is something to be celebrated, is something to be embraced. All right? Bakit kamo? Kasi if you don't do that, yung tinatawag na deficit, deficit understanding of multilingualism, deficit na kung multilingual ka, deficit yun. In other words, kakulangan yun. All right? Marami niyang mamumroblema. Pati mental health ng mga estudyante, emotional well-being ng mga estudyante, mamumroblema kasi nga yung approach ng teacher ay, oy, ba't ganyan accent mo? Oy, bakit nagsalita ka niyan? Hindi. Alright? do something, work around it, and do something about it, right? Lastly, before I wrap it up, going back again to Singapore. Merong ganon. Halimbawa, very early on, primary one, Singlish speaker lang yung estudyante, yung pupil na ito kasi nga galing siya sa disadvantaged family eh. So usually yung access nila doon is Singlish, hindi yung standard Singapore English, no? So Singlish speaking. So can you imagine, think of Singlish as any L1. Okay? Think of any L1. Tapos the student, the pupil was asked something about an experience, no? I think they were talking about a rat, yung daga, or something experience nila sa daga. May experience yung estudyante sa daga. All right? I think they were talking about kung paano may lumabas na daga sa bahay nila at nagkalampagan sila at nagtakbuhan sila, and so many things happened, funny things happened. This particular teacher, all right, allowed the pupil to talk in Singlish. Bakit? Kasi ang pinaka-importante sa kanya ay ma-relate niya yung experience niya at ma-explain niya yung experience niya. Kasi in the first place, no, kung Singlish speaker ito, hindi marunong ng standard English, tapos sabihin ka agad ng teacher sa P1, no, oy, 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 speak only in standard English. Eh, wala nga siyang repertoire. Hindi nga kasama yung repertoire niya. Hindi kasama doon sa competence niya na magsalita in English. So, paano yun? Diba? So, you have to start with the student. Ang ginawa ng teacher, halimbawa, was after the student described and narrated the story of rats, all right? Ang ginawa ng teacher, translate niya into English, into standard Singapore English. All right? What is the pedagogical reason for that? Kasi nung panahon na yon, hindi pa capable ang estudyante, ang pupil na magsalita. Ang kailangan lang niya pakinggan. Makinig, makinig, makinig. Hanggang sa patuloy na yan slowly winning away. All right? Hanggang sa towards the end of primary 1, all right? Meron ng mga standard English sentences na madidinig sa pupil. You see that? So, hindi siya mabilis. Kasi hindi pwedeng mabilis kasi nga we have to start where our students are. Diba? Doon siya sa umpisa. Saan ba sila? Saan ba sila? Umpisahan natin doon kung anong meron sila and then slowly go to where they should be going. Hindi ito pagsabihin na ay meron kasing kailangang goals. Right? True din naman, 'di ba? So anong gagawin mo as a teacher? All right? Halimbawa, yung goal sa primary 1 is dito. Dito, 'di ba? Eh yung estudyante mo nag-umpisa dito. 'Di ba? So ang ginagawa, dahil nga sa English only halimbawa, ang ginagawa, galing dito kaagad yung expectation o dito kaagad. At since meron kang mga policies, mga practices na preventing them to contribute to this. So instead na dito siya, na gusto mo siya dito, hindi na lang siya gumalaw. 'Di ba? Whereas, kung gumamit ka ng certain strategies, halimbawa, na at least man lang, alright, makatulong sa kanya, hindi man siya nakaabot dito, pero kung umakyat sa dito sa paggitna, that's better than wala. 'Di ba? And hopefully, makaka-keep up siya in the future. So imagine kung P1 yun, dito siya dapat, tapos i-require mo na dapat doon. Hindi siya, pag P2 siya, umakyat siya, dito pa rin siya. Di ba? Tapos P3 siya, doon na naman yung goal posts nyo, dito pa rin siya, hanggang dito. Hanggang sa nga, aabot na ng pagdating ng primary 9, aabot na ng 9 out of 10 hindi nakakabasa. Kasi nga, doon yung expectations, alright, tapos i-push ka agad doon kung saan hindi kaya ng mga estudyante. Alright? So yun ang nagiging issue, yun ang naging problema if we do not divest ourselves of, an understanding of what we can do you know, in terms of transformative pedagogies, you know, through different strategies and so on and so forth. So going back to what we have done so far, all right, to what we have discussed so far in the past two sessions, we will still be talking about translanguaging, but this time translanguaging as culture next week. All right. Dr. Marisa will be forwarding to you an article to read on translanguaging, but this time much more theoretical. All right. And in nature. All right. But just to pull us all together. All right. The idea behind the question of language, in other words, all right, is the whole idea that language, the meaning that we attach to it is never a given. All right. And let's always bear that in mind. It's never a given. Okay. It's never a given precisely because um, we have been invested in it through education. We have been imposed upon ideologically by the educational system, but even by even society in general. All right. And that's what we need to parang reverse or reconstruct or reconceptualize, that our notion of language is something that is imposed on us. Kaya as we move along, all right, as we move along, kailangan natin na dismantle ito. There will be more time to conceptually, you know, demolish these questions theoretically, kaya more about the practical side yung ginawa ko, all right? But this time now transitioning into the very notion of culture. Ano ba ibig sabihin ng culture? But this time through the lens of you know, language use as well as translingualism. By today or probably by any time, Dr. Isa will forward to you the article. All right, Dr. Isa, please stay kung pwede just for about 2 or 3 minutes. But for the rest of you, I hope you have a good day, right? And see you. By the way, next week, it will be an earlier timing for us. No, it's 8. I think it's 8 to 10 if I'm not mistaken. If I mentioned that, right? Um, because of that, because I think I mentioned that last time. So we will let you know, but it's 8 to 10. All right, early on, and with one article to read as well. But it's going to be another, I think, supposedly, hopefully, fascinating article. All right. Okay. So maraming salamat and have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much po.
Maraming
Thank you so
salamat
much.
po.
Thank you
Salamat.
Take
very much
care.
po. Bye
po.
po.
Thank you
Sir.
po.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Salamat po.
Salamat din, Lloyd.